I found the receipt before I found the empty box. It was crumpled in the bathroom trash, tucked inside a tissue stained with that bright, garish poppy lipstick Nora wears, the kind that bleeds into the fine lines around her mouth. My hand, wrinkled and spotted from 7th years of sun and dishwater, hovered over it. I hadn't been snooping, I was just emptying the small bin. But the sharp corner of the thermal paper caught my eye. A little white square. Pawn and Lux. The name felt dirty, invasive, in the quiet, rose-tiled bathroom Arthur and I had built in 1978. Beneath the name, a figure that made my throat clench and the air leave my lungs, $1,400. It wasn't the money. It was the silence from the other room. The wrong kind of silence.
Not the peaceful quiet of a house lived in, but the tense, held breath quiet of a secret.
I didn't need to check. I knew, with the kind of primal, sickening certainty that settles in a mother's bones, what she had paid for. I knew what $400 worth of my life looked like. My heart was a cold stone in my chest. I didn't go to her, not yet. I dropped the tissue and the receipt back into the bin, a small puff of talcum powder rising to meet them. I walked out of the bathroom, down the hall that Arthur had paneled in dark walnut, my hand grazing the wall. I passed Nora's childhood room, where she was now, at 32, camped out. I heard the click, click, click of her fingernails on her phone screen, the sound of her world, a world that didn't include us. I went to Arthur's study. The room still smelled of him. Old books, pipe tobacco, and a faint lingering trace of the sawdust that had clung to his clothes for 45 years. I went to the mahogany box on his desk. It wasn't locked. It never had been. It was the one thing in this house I touched every day. A ritual, a prayer, a way of saying good morning, and a way of saying good night. I lifted the heavy lid. The rich, dark blue velvet inside was empty. The indentation, perfectly round, where his wedding ring had rested for the 2 years since his passing, was a hollow. A tiny, screaming void. It was the only thing I had left of him that still held his shape. I stood there for a long time. The house was silent, save for the distant click, click, click. I stared at that empty circle, and I felt the last bit of Arthur leave the room. He hadn't just died. He was being erased, sold, for $1,400. She didn't even look up when I walked back into the kitchen, the open, empty box in my hand. And I didn't know then that this single, hollowed-out piece of velvet would cost us more than the $1,400 she got for it. I placed the box on the quartz island, the one she'd insisted I install last year. "You have to update, Mom. Nobody wants dark old granite anymore." The sound of the mahogany on the stone was soft, but it echoed in the room like a gavel. That got her attention. She looked up from the blue light of her phone, her face a smooth, filtered mask. "What?" she asked, annoyed. I just nodded at the box. She saw it. Her eyes, so much like Arthur's, widened, but not with guilt. Not at first, with irritation, as if I'd caught her smoking, not committing this sacrilege. "Mom," she said, standing up. She was already composing her defense. I could see the justifications lining up behind her eyes. "How could you, Nora?" My voice was quiet. It didn't tremble. I was surprised. I thought I would be screaming, but I felt cold, glacial. "You don't understand," she said, pushing her long, chemically lightened hair behind her ear. "Explain it to me. It was just sitting there, Mom. It's a thing. My hand tightened around the lid of the box. "That thing was on your father's hand for 45 years. It was on his hand when he held you for the first time. It was on his hand when he built the staircase you're standing on. It was on his hand when I held him as he—" I couldn't finish. "And now it's helping me," she said, her voice rising. "I needed seed money. For the brand. You know I'm trying to launch. This is an investment." "An investment," I repeated the word. It tasted like ash. "You sold your father's wedding ring to launch your brand?" Yes, because it's my future. Don't you get it? I'm trying to build something. You and Dad? You had this. She waved her hand around the kitchen, the house. You had your life. I don't have anything. You had this, I whispered, holding up the empty box. You had him. You had our history. History doesn't pay the bills. She snapped. History doesn't get you a sponsorship. It was just sitting in a box, collecting dust. At least I used it for something. I'm going to Bali. It's a networking trip. For influencers. This is how the world works now, Mom. You just don't understand. The words. The casual, brutal dismissal. It was just sitting there. I thought of the ring. I saw it so clearly. Not a shiny, perfect thing. A simple 14-karat gold band. It was worn thin on the bottom, where it had rubbed against the handle of his hammer for decades. It had a deep scratch on the side from 1995 when he was fixing the gutter and Nora, then 10, had let the aluminum ladder slip. He'd caught it, his hand scraping against the brick, saving her from being hit. He'd come in, bleeding but laughing, telling her, "See? The ring took the hit. It's our little secret. A thing. He would have wanted me to have it," Nora said quietly, trying a new tactic. He always wanted me to be successful. That was the line. The one that finally broke the ice. Get out, I said. What? Get out of his house. I pointed to the door. Take your seed money, go to Bali, go and network. But you can't stay here. Not tonight. Mom, you're being dramatic. It's not just anything, I finally yelled. The shout tore through my chest, raw and unfamiliar. It was his, it was us. And you sold it. You sold it for a trip, for pictures. You sold the scratch, Nora. You sold the wear. You sold the life, she recoiled. For the first time, a flicker of something, shame maybe, crossed her face. But it was gone in an instant, replaced by that hard, defensive shell. Fine, she spat. I'll go, but don't call me when you're lonely, wondering why I never visit. She grabbed her purse, a designer one I know she couldn't afford, and her laptop. She was packed for her trip already, I realized. She had planned this. She had looked at me this morning, over coffee, knowing she had already sold her father's soul, which was resting in the pocket of her jeans. The front door slammed. The echo reverberated through the walnut-paneled hall. I stood alone in the kitchen. The house was finally truly silent. I sank into the chair at the island, my fingers tracing the empty, perfect, round indentation in the velvet. Scrap value, I thought. She sold him for scrap. The first day was a fog. I moved through the house like a ghost, my own home made alien by the violence of that empty box. Every object felt like an accusation. The grandfather clock in the hall, Arthur's meticulous chisel marks on the mantel, the heavy oak chairs he'd reupholstered himself, they all seemed to watch me, asking how I could have let this happen. How I could have raised a child who could erase a man for the price of a plane ticket. I spent the morning on the phone. My voice was calm, detached. I was a detective investigating a theft, but the theft was of my own life. I called the number on the receipt. Pawn and Lux. The name alone was an insult, a marriage of desperation and aspiration. A man answered, his voice bored and flat. Yes, ma'am. How can I help you? I believe my daughter sold something to you yesterday. By mistake, a ring, a man's gold wedding band. We get dozens of those a day, ma'am. You got a receipt number? Yes. I read the number from the crumpled paper. I heard him typing. A long, agonizing pause. Yeah, a 14-karat band. Weighed out. Paid $2,400. That's the one. I need it back, I said, my voice cracking just a little. It's my late husband's. It's sentimental. I'll pay you. I'll pay you the $1,400 plus a fee. Whatever you want, the man sighed. It was the sound of someone who had heard this story 1,000 times. Ma'am, you don't understand the business. This isn't a library. We don't hold things. That ring came in at 10:05 a.m. It was in our smelter's bin by 10:30. The word hung in the air. Smelter. What? What do you mean? It's processed, ma'am. High turnover items, gold, platinum, we don't put them in the case. The value is in the metal, not the sentiment. It's scrap. It's already on a truck, probably, heading to a refinery in Delaware. It's gone. Scrap. He said it so easily. The same way Nora had said, a thing. My knees buckled. I had to sit down on the bottom step of the staircase Arthur built. Ma'am? You there? I hung up. Gone. Not sitting under a glass case waiting to be rescued. Not on someone else's finger, living a new life. Gone, melted, erased, rendered back into a raw, anonymous lump of metal, its 45 years of history, its scratches and scuffs, its worn thinness, all boiled away. Nora hadn't just sold him. She had destroyed him. I sat on that step for hours. The sun moved across the entryway, casting long shadows that looked like bars. I thought about Nora. I truly tried, to understand the hollowness inside her that would allow this. What had I done wrong? Arthur and we'd raised her with love. We gave her everything. Maybe that was the problem. We gave her everything, so she never understood the value of anything. She'd grown up watching the world change on a screen. Her heroes weren't people who built things, like her father. They were people who showed things. People who posed with leased cars and rented houses, pretending it was theirs. A generation of performers, all playing the part of success, desperate for applause. And my daughter, my Nora, was one of them. She wasn't just going to Bali for a networking trip. She was going on a pilgrimage, paid for with the melted-down memories of a better man. That evening, the anger began to set in. It was a different kind, a cold, hard anger. It wasn't the hot flash of the kitchen confrontation. It was a deep, structural rage. I couldn't just sit here. I couldn't let Pawn and Lux be the end of the story. I got in my car. I drove downtown. Pawn and Lux was squeezed between a dollar store and a boarded-up taqueria. The windows were tinted, the sign a garish neon pink and gold. It was everything I hated about the new world. I parked across the street and just watched it. I saw people go in, a young woman with a baby hiding a laptop in her stroller, an old man holding a trumpet case, each one walking in with a piece of their past, hoping to buy a little bit of a future. I was going to go in. I was going to, what? Yell at the man who'd sighed at me? Demand to see the smelter's bin? I put my hand on the door handle, but I couldn't. It was pointless. The man was right. It was a business that preyed on the Noras of the world and on the wreckage they left behind. I drove home. The house was dark. I walked into the study and stood before the empty mahogany box. The rage was still there, but it was coalescing. It was turning into a plan. Nora had erased Arthur. She had taken the truth of him and turned it into scrap. A cold, terrible thought formed in my mind. A Dostoevskian kind of justice. If she could destroy the truth, then I would have to create a new one. I left the study and went to my own bedroom. I went to the large, cedar-lined wardrobe where I keep my old things. Not Arthur's, but mine. In the back, behind my wedding dress, which was sealed in a box, and a stack of my mother's quilts, was my mother's own jewelry box. Not a small, delicate thing, but a heavy, leather-bound case. I opened it, the smell of cedar and old perfume. Inside, nestled in faded satin, were the pieces of my family. My grandmother's cameo, my mother's pearls, and, there, my father's wedding ring. My mother had given it to me when she'd moved into the nursing home. Your father would want you to have it, Helen, just to keep. Just to remember. I hadn't looked at it in years. It was different from Arthur's. Heavier, 1940s style. A wider, more substantial band of gold. My father was a mailman. He wore this ring for 50 years, walking the same route, through rain and snow, a quiet, steady man who never aspired to be anything other than what he was. I took it out. It was cold. It held his life, his 50 years of stamps and letters and worn-out shoes. It was not Arthur's ring. It was not the ring Nora sold, but it was a ring. It was a life. It was a past. I held it in my palm. It was a symbol. And Nora, my Nora, who lived in a world of symbols, of brands and logos. She had stolen one symbol. I wondered what she would do if I presented her with another. I put my father's ring into my pocket. I went back to Arthur's study. I stood before the empty mahogany box. I looked at the velvet hollow. Then slowly, I placed my father's ring into the indentation. It didn't fit perfectly. It was too wide, too thick. It sat slightly proud of the velvet, not sinking into the groove Arthur's ring had worn. It was a replacement. A forgery, a lie, and I would use it. When she came crawling back, and she would come crawling back, because the world she was chasing eats its young. This is what I would be waiting with. Not forgiveness, not the ring she'd stolen, but a test. Weeks turned into a month. Autumn bled into the gray, skeletal beginnings of winter. The house grew colder. I kept the thermostat at 65. The silence, once Nora's hateful parting shot, became my companion. But it was a restless quiet. I had become a digital ghost. I, Helen Miller, who still wrote checks at the grocery store and read a physical newspaper, had learned to navigate the world Nora inhabited. I opened my laptop, the one Arthur had bought me, to keep up with the grandkids, though we only had Nora, and she never emailed. I found her. She wasn't hard to find. Her brand was Nora Lux Life. I watched her. I spent my lonely November nights watching this stranger who wore my daughter's face. I saw her in Bali. The $1,400 had been spent quickly. I saw her posing in an infinity pool at a resort, holding a cocktail. She was wearing a bikini I'd never seen, her body angled in a way that seemed painful. Her smile was wide, but it never, ever reached her eyes. The caption read, "Manifesting my best life. So blessed to be connecting with so many amazing creators on this journey. Boss life Bali babe, manifest destiny manifesting." That was her generation's word for wanting. I scrolled. I saw her at a content creators brunch. A long table of other young women, all looking identical. All filtered, all smooth-skinned, all holding up glasses of champagne, all staring at their own phones, probably posting the same picture. It looked like a banquet of beautiful, hungry mannequins. I wasn't just sad. I was repulsed. This was the future she had bought? This sterile, performed joy? I, on the other hand, was living in the past. I couldn't help it. The house demanded it. One rainy afternoon, I was cleaning out the mudroom. It was a task I'd been avoiding. It was his space. His boots were still there, caked with the dry mud of his last walk in the garden. I picked one up. The heft of it, the worn sole, and I remembered. The memory didn't float in gently. It hit me like a physical blow. The scratch, the one on the ring. I'd told Nora it was from the gutter incident. I had lied. It was from 1993. Nora was 8. Arthur was building the stone retaining wall at the edge of the property. It was his summer project. Nora was helping, which meant she was mostly sitting on the grass, making chains of dandelions. But she'd wanted to place a stone. "A big one, Daddy." "I'm strong." He'd warned her it was too heavy. She'd insisted. "I can do it." She'd hoisted it, a jagged piece of granite, and immediately lost her grip. It fell. Not on her foot, thank God, but squarely on Arthur's left hand, which was resting on the wall. I heard the sound from the kitchen. A sharp crack, and then Arthur's sudden breath-sucking cry of pain. Then Nora's shriek. I ran out. Arthur was on his knees, holding his hand. Nora was hysterical, sobbing, "I killed him! I killed him!" He was bleeding. The stone had gashed his knuckles. But he wasn't looking at the blood. He was looking at his ring. The granite had struck it directly. There was a deep, ugly gouge in the gold. He looked at Nora, who was pale with terror. And he did the most Arthur thing imaginable. He smiled. He pulled her in, his bloody hand and all, and hugged her. "Shh, sweetie. You didn't kill me. Look." He held up his hand, blood and all. "The ring took the hit. It saved my finger." He wiped the blood away from the ring, showing her the deep new scratch. "See that? That's your mark. Now you're part of the story. It's not just my ring anymore. It's our ring. Nora, her tears slowing, had touched the scratch with her tiny finger. Our ring, she'd whispered. She had forgotten. Of course she had forgotten. Or worse, she hadn't. I sat down on the cold mudroom floor, his boot in my lap. I was shaking. She didn't just sell a piece of her father. She sold the physical proof of his forgiveness. She sold the very moment he'd turned her childhood mistake into an act of love. She had taken that story, their story, and sold it to Pawn and Lux to be melted into an anonymous block. Scrap value. The disgust I felt was so profound, it was almost paralyzing. The daughter I'd raised, the little girl who had cried in her father's arms, was gone. She had been replaced by this Nora Lux life, this hollow creature who smiled for a camera, her soul as empty as the mahogany box on Arthur's desk. The digital world gave me more clues. The post from Bali stopped. A week of silence. Then, new pictures. She was back in the States. In Los Angeles, it looked like. The photos were different. More desperate. She wasn't in resorts anymore. She was posing against street art, brightly painted walls in sketchy-looking neighborhoods. She was promoting things I'd never heard of. Green wellness powders and cheap synthetic-looking clothes. The captions were frantic. The hustle never stops. Building my empire one day at a time. So many DMs about this amazing top. Link in bio. The comments section, once a chorus of goals. And amazing. It was changing. I ordered this 2 weeks ago. Where is it? This is the same powder she was calling toxic last month. Nora, can you please answer my email? You charged my card. I watched my daughter's brand begin to curdle. It was like watching a slow-motion car crash. She wasn't just an influencer. She was, I realized with a cold dread, a fraud. She was taking orders for products she didn't have. She was making promises she couldn't keep. The seed money was gone. The $1,400 had bought her a ticket to a world that was now demanding payment. I closed the laptop. The house was dark. I went to the study. I opened the box. My father's ring sat there, heavy, solid, honest. It was a mailman's ring, a ring that represented 42 years of work, real work. Not hustle, not brand, just the steady, unglamorous, vital work of showing up. I closed the lid. I knew the call was coming. The only question was when. It came on a Tuesday, just after 10 p.m. A number I didn't recognize, with a different area code. Not Nora. Hello? Is this Mrs. Helen Miller? Nora's mother? The voice was a woman's. Young and trying very hard not to cry. Yes. Who is this? My name is Sarah. I'm one of Nora's partners. I invested in her brand. $5,000. It was my savings. For my wedding, my blood went cold. 5,000? She was supposed to buy inventory. We were going to split the profits, but she's gone. She blocked me. Her phone is disconnected. I'm so sorry to call you, but I don't know what to do. The address she gave me was a P.O. box. I found your name from an old post. Did I get scammed, Mrs. Miller? Did your daughter scam me? I leaned against the wall. The walnut felt cold against my cheek. My daughter. Not just a fool. Not just a materialist, a thief. I don't know where she is, I said, my voice a whisper. But if I find her, I will make sure you get your money. I hung up. I looked at my own hands. Arthur's hands. Honest hands. I dialed Nora's number. The one I knew. The number you have dialed has been disconnected. She was running. The call from Sarah changed the texture of my grief. The loss of the ring was a sin against the past, a spiritual wound. This was a crime against the present. It was $5,000 stolen from a young woman who, just like Nora, was trying to build a life. The irony was corrosive. My daughter, who claimed she had nothing, had not hesitated to take everything from someone else. The days that followed were the worst. The anger I'd felt before was a clean fire. This was a toxic sludge. Shame. I was deeply, profoundly ashamed. I, Helen Miller, had raised a thief. Arthur, who had never cheated a man out of a single dime, who would drive 10 miles to return a hammer he'd accidentally picked up from a job site. His daughter was a con artist. I went to the bank. I sat with Mr. Henderson, a man who'd known Arthur for 30 years. Helen, this is a large withdrawal. From your nest egg. Is everything all right? I'm paying for a family emergency, Jim. My voice was brittle. Nothing. Medical, I hope. No, I said, looking down at the withdrawal slip. Morale. He didn't ask again. I transferred the $5,000. I found Sarah on social media. Her profile was open, full of pictures of her and her smiling fiancé. I sent her a message, and then I wired her the money. I am Helen, Nora's mother. I am so sorry. This should cover what you are owed, she replied almost instantly. Oh my God, thank you. I can't believe it. Thank you. I closed the laptop. I had cleaned up her mess. But the stain was still there, and it had cost me. That money was what Arthur had left for my old age, for the new roof, for the day I might need a nurse. Now it was gone, vaporized by Nora's brand. Winter set in for real. The first snow fell, heavy and wet, blanketing the garden. The house felt like a tomb. I stopped going into Arthur's study. The mahogany box, even with my father's ring sitting in it, felt like a judgment. Then, 2 weeks before Christmas, the phone rang. It was 2:17 a.m. The 3 a.m. call is the one you dread. The 2 a.m. call is its cruel cousin. I fumbled for the receiver on my nightstand, my heart already hammering. Hello? A long silence. Just the sound of crying? No, the sound of a large empty room. And wind. Mom? The voice was tiny, cracked, unrecognizable. Nora? Mom, A sob. A wet, desperate animal sound. I'm at the bus station. The Greyhound station, downtown. The bus station? Nora, what's going on? I don't have any money, Mom. I'm so cold. My bag got stolen. They took everything. Everything? I thought. You had nothing left to steal. I'm coming, I said. I didn't ask why. I didn't ask about Sarah. I just hung up, pulled my boots on over my pajamas, and grabbed my heavy wool coat. The drive downtown was a nightmare. The streets were slick with freezing rain. The windshield wipers beat a frantic, uneven rhythm. Thump, 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 like a failing heart. The Greyhound station at 2 a.m. is not a place for the hopeful. It's a way station for the lost. The smell of stale coffee, disinfectant, and despair hits you the second you walk in. The fluorescent lights are a merciless, buzzing white, making everyone look sick. I saw her huddled on a hard plastic bench. If I hadn't been her mother, I would have walked right past her. The Nora Lux life was gone. This was a refugee. Her expensive, chemically treated hair was matted, dark at the roots, and clung to her face in greasy strands. She was wearing a thin jacket, the same one I'd seen in her L.A. street art photos. It was torn at the elbow. Her designer handbag was gone. Her phone was gone. She was just a 32-year-old woman, shivering, with chipped nail polish and chapped lips. Nora. She looked up. Her eyes were dull. It took a second for her to register me. When she did, her face didn't light up with relief. It crumpled. The performative mask shattered, and all the raw, terrified failure beneath it poured out. She didn't stand up. She just fell forward, burying her face in her knees, and began to sob. Not the dramatic sobs of her kitchen tantrum. These were the gut-wrenching, silent, shaking sobs of absolute defeat. I didn't touch her. Not yet. Where's your luggage? I asked. Gone, she stuttered. In L.A., my roommate, she kicked me out. I couldn't pay. She locked up all my stuff. I had to sell my laptop to buy the bus ticket. Then at a stop in Arizona, I fell asleep. Someone took my purse. She had nothing. Literally nothing. Not even $1. Can we go home? She whispered, looking up at me. Her face was streaked with dirt and mascara. Yes, I said. We can go home. The drive back was silent. The thump-thump of the wipers. She was shivering so hard I turned the heat up all the way. The car filled with the smell of unwashed hair and old clothes. She finally spoke as we pulled into the driveway, the house dark except for the porch light I'd left on. I saw the posts, Mom, on a computer at the library, from that girl, Sarah. I paid her, I said, my voice flat. Nora flinched. I paid her. With your father's money. The money he left for me. She was silent. She just stared at the house. His house, oh God, she whispered. It wasn't an expletive. It sounded like a prayer. She got out of the car. She walked like an old woman. I followed her inside. She didn't go to the kitchen. She didn't look at anything. She just walked up the stairs to her old childhood room and closed the door. A minute later, I heard the shower run. I stood in the cold kitchen. I looked at the quartz island, sterile and white. I went to the study. I opened the mahogany box. My father's ring sat there, heavy, patient, the confrontation I had planned. It all seemed so pointless now. The test, the lie. What was the point? The woman upstairs wasn't the arrogant, entitled monster who had left. The woman upstairs was Scrap. I heard the shower stop. I heard, through the floorboards, the sound of her getting into her old bed. I heard the quiet, muffled sound of her crying into her childhood pillow. I closed the box. My plan was dead. I didn't know what to do now. The anger was gone, hollowed out. All I felt was the crushing, unbearable weight of what had been lost. All of it. Nora slept. She slept for almost 24 hours, a dead, exhaustive sleep that was more like a coma. I looked in on her once. She was curled in the single bed she'd had since she was 12, the one with the white eyelet quilt. She looked small, shrunken. The lines of entitlement and arrogance had been scrubbed from her face, leaving behind a raw, bruised exhaustion. I spent the day in a state of suspension. I made coffee. I read the paper. I paid some bills. I did not go to the study. I did not look at the box. I was a mother and my child was home broken. The part of me that was Arthur's widow, the avenging, grieving part, had to wait. When she finally emerged, it was late afternoon. The house was filled with the gray light of a December dusk. She came downstairs wearing an old pilled fleece bathrobe of mine. Her hair was clean but stringy, and she'd scrubbed her face so hard it was pink. She didn't speak. She just went to the kitchen and poured a glass of water, her hand shaking. I was sitting at the kitchen table. "Are you hungry?" I asked. She shook her head. She sat down opposite me. The quartz island was between us, like a large white negotiating table. We sat in silence for a full 5 minutes. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator. "I'll get a job," she said finally, her voice hoarse. "At the diner or the grocery store. I'll pay you back, all of it. The $5,000 and the $1,400. How?" I asked. It wasn't an accusation. It was a practical question. That's a lot of diner shifts, Nora. I know. She looked down at her hands. Her long acrylic nails were gone, bitten or torn off, leaving her own nails beneath them, raw and uneven. "I'll do it. It might take years. But I'll do it. And the ring?" I asked, my voice quiet. "You said you'd pay me back for the ring. How do you put a price on that, Nora? How do you pay back the scratch?" "The where?" She looked up. Her eyes were swollen. This was the moment. This was the core of it. "I can't," she whispered. The admission hung in the air. I know that. I can't fix that. I was so stupid, Mom. I was so empty." She leaned forward, her face contorting. "You don't understand. Everyone I knew, they were all doing it. They all had these amazing lives. These brands. They were someone. And I was just Nora Miller, living in my mom's house. I was a nobody. I just wanted to be seen. Your father saw you," I said, the words sharp and cold. "I saw you. It wasn't enough. No!" she cried, slamming her hand on the table. You saw me. The me you wanted. The little girl. You didn't see the 32-year-old failure. You don't know what it's like. To feel so behind. To feel like you've missed it. The starting gun. And everyone is running the race and you're still in the locker room. I thought if I just looked the part, if I just faked it, I would become it. And did you? She let out a hollow, bitter laugh. I became this. She gestured to herself, the bathrobe, the wrecked face. I became a thief, and I lost the only thing. She stopped. She looked toward the study. I kept thinking about it. On the bus, when my purse was stolen. All I could think was, it's fair, because I stole from him. I stole Dad's ring. And the world stole my cheap, stupid bag. It felt like balance. I stared at her. This was a level of self-awareness I had never seen in her. This was the Dostoevskian depth, the sin and the agonizing, self-inflicted punishment. She was living in the psychological prison she had built for herself. I would go to the pawn shop, she continued, her voice gaining a frantic, desperate energy. Every day, if I could. I would work there for free. I would sweep their floors for the rest of my life if they would just give it back. But they can't. You can't unmelt something, can you, Mom? No, I said. You can't. The finality of that word crushed the last bit of energy out of her. She slumped, all the confessions spent. Now, I thought. Now is the time. I stood up. I walked to the study. She watched me, her eyes wide with a kind of dread. I went to the desk. I opened the mahogany box. I took out my father's ring, the heavy, honest 1940s gold band. I walked back into the kitchen. I held it in my open palm. Nora stared at it, her brow furrowed in confusion. What is that? Your father's ring is gone, I said, my voice steady. It's scrap. It's an anonymous lump of gold in a refinery in Delaware. It is gone. She flinched at the words. I paid Sarah. That money is gone, too. My nest egg is $5,000 smaller. That is also gone. She closed her eyes, as if taking the blows. This, I said, holding out my hand, is my father's wedding ring. Your grandfather's. He was a mailman. He wore this for 50 years, walking the same 5-mile route every single day. He never had a brand. He never manifested a damn thing, except breakfast for his children and a home that was paid for. He died with $4,000 in the bank and a pension. He was the most successful man I ever knew after your father. Nora opened her eyes. She was looking at the ring. It was ugly by her standards, heavy, old-fashioned. It had no luxury value. It's not Arthur's, I said. It's not your past. It's not the story you lost. It can't replace the scratch you earned when you were 8 years old. Her head snapped up. Her eyes? She did remember. The color drained from her face. Oh, God, she whispered. The wall, I'd forgotten. But he didn't, I said. And the ring didn't, until you sold it. I pushed my hand, palm open, across the island. The ring slid on the cold quartz, stopping right in front of her. This is not a gift, Nora. It's not forgiveness. It's a replacement. Not for what you lost, but for what you need. You can take this. You can wear it, and you can use it to remember what real value, what real work looks like. Or you can leave it. You can leave this box empty, too. I put the empty mahogany box down on the island next to the ring. It's your choice, I said. She stared at the ring. Just stared at it. Her hand, the one with the raw, bitten nails, hovered over it. She was trembling. She was looking at the symbol of a life she had never understood. A life of quiet dignity, of simple work, of showing up. It was the antithesis of everything Nora Luck's life stood for. Her fingers slowly, tentatively reached out. She didn't grab it. She just touched it, the way you would touch a hot stove or an ancient holy relic. She pushed it with one finger. He was a mailman? She whispered. Every day, I said. For 42 years. Rain or shine. He worked. She closed her hand over the ring. She didn't lift it. She just held it against the cold stone of the island, her knuckles white. She squeezed her eyes shut. I turned around and walked out of the kitchen. I left her alone with the ring, the empty box, and the ghosts of the two good men she had, in her own way, betrayed. Life found a new, strange rhythm. A rhythm of penance. Nora was true to her word. The day after our confrontation, she walked downtown. She came back 3 hours later. "I have a job," she said. She was standing in the entryway, holding a folded stained apron. "Where?" "The Old Town Diner. They're starting me on dishwashing. 6 nights a week. Graveyard shift. 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. Nora, it's the only place that would hire me on the spot," she said, cutting me off. She wouldn't meet my eyes. "I start tonight." And so it began, my daughter. The luxury influencer became a dishwasher. I would be in bed, and I'd hear her small car, a 15-year-old Corolla she'd had since college, start up at 10:45 p.m. I'd hear her come in at 7:30 in the morning, smelling of bleach, old coffee, and fry trap grease. She would shower, fall into her childhood bed, and sleep until the afternoon. When she was awake, she was a ghost. We circled each other in the house. The shame was a third person living with us. Sitting at the dinner table, watching TV in the living room, she was paying me back. Every 2 weeks on her payday, she would come to me with a small, damp wad of cash. It's $340, she'd say, holding it out. "It's all I have after gas. Nora, you need—" "Take it, Mom. Please. Put it toward Sarah, or just put it in a jar. It's a start. I took it." I put it in an old biscuit tin in Arthur's study. The tin slowly began to fill. It was a pathetic, agonizingly slow process. At this rate, it would take her more than a year to pay back the $5,000. And that didn't even touch the $400. She was thinner. The influencer puffiness was gone. Her face was gaunt, and dark circles lived under her eyes. But she was solid. Her hands, which I'd only ever seen filed, polished or covered in product, were now raw, red. The skin was cracked. Her nails were cut short, permanently grimed. She was developing what her father had called work hands. I never mentioned the ring. My father's ring. After that day in the kitchen, it had vanished. So had the mahogany box. I didn't ask. I didn't look. I was terrified to know the answer. Had she sold it? Had she taken my father's ring, the mailman's ring, and sold that one too? For what? For bus money? For a new pair of shoes? The thought was so ugly I pushed it down. If she had, that would be the end. That would be the final, unsurvivable betrayal. One afternoon in late January, I went to the diner for coffee. It was a weak pretense. I needed to see. It was 3 p.m. The diner was quiet. I sat in a booth by the window. A new girl, not Nora, took my order. I saw Nora through the pass-through window to the kitchen. She was in the back, in the dish pit. She was wearing a hairnet and a t-shirt gray with age. She was scrubbing a massive blackened sheet pan. Her entire body was thrown into the work. Her face was set in a mask of grim, focused exhaustion. A waiter, a young man with a sleeve of tattoos, dropped a heavy tub of plates next to her. "These are priority, Miller," he barked. "Table 4 is camping." Nora didn't look up. She just nodded, grunted, and dragged the heavy tub toward her, the steam rising in her face. A woman in the booth behind me, a local I recognized, leaned over to her friend. "You see who that is?" she whispered. "Who?" "That's Nora Miller, Helen and Arthur's girl. The one who, went off, thought she was some big-shot model. Look at her. My God, what happened? Ran out of money, I guess. It's sad, really. Arthur must be rolling in his grave." I put a $5 bill on the table for my coffee, which hadn't even arrived, and left. I walked home, the cold air biting my face. Arthur must be rolling in his grave, was he? I got home. The house was empty. Nora wouldn't be up for another hour. I couldn't stand it anymore. I had to know. I went to her room. My heart was pounding. This was a violation. I was snooping, but I had to know if my father's ring was gone. I opened her door. The room was clean, bleak. Her childhood posters were gone. Her bed was made. There was no brand here, no skincare, no Lux anything, just a bed, a dresser, and the smell of industrial soap. I looked on the dresser. Nothing. In the top drawer, just socks, t-shirts. My dread deepened. She'd sold it. She'd sold it. I looked at her closet. I looked on her nightstand. Nothing. She sold it. I backed out of the room feeling sick. I had given her a test, a symbol of redemption, and she had sold it for scrap. Just like Arthur's, she was unsavable. The hollowness wasn't a phase. It was who she was. I walked down the hall, numb. I was passing Arthur's study, but I stopped. The door was ajar, just a crack. I never left it ajar. I pushed it open, and I saw her, Nora. She wasn't asleep. She was sitting at Arthur's desk. She was just sitting in his chair. The old leather one. In her hand was my father's ring. She was just holding it, turning it over and over, staring at it. The mahogany box was open on the desk in front of her. She didn't hear me. She was lost. I watched her. She wasn't admiring it. She was studying it, as if it were a map, as if it held an answer. She rubbed her thumb, her raw red thumb, over the smooth, worn gold. She wasn't wearing it. She hadn't sold it. She was keeping it in here, in his study. She would come in here after her shift or before it and just hold it. She bowed her head. Her shoulders began to shake. She was crying. Silently, she whispered something. I couldn't hear it. I'm trying, she whispered, her voice cracking. I'm trying, Dad. I'm really trying. She wasn't talking to me. She wasn't talking to her grandfather. She was in her father's study, holding her grandfather's ring and talking to him. I backed away. I pulled the door closed silently. I went to my own room and sat on my bed, my hand over my mouth. Arthur must be rolling in his grave. No, he wouldn't be. He would be in that kitchen, scrubbing pans with her. The ring. She hadn't sold it, but she wasn't wearing it either. She hadn't put it on. She hadn't taken it as her own. It was still a symbol, but she felt she hadn't earned it. The girl who had been so defined by entitlement, who believed she deserved luxury, now felt she didn't even deserve to wear a simple old gold band. The change in her. It was deeper than I knew. The winter was long and hard. Nora worked. She paid me. The biscuit tin in Arthur's study grew heavier, filled with her greasy, bleach-smelling dollar bills. We existed in this quiet, grim truce. She'd wake, eat, read a library book, and go to work. I'd knit, garden, what little I could in the cold, and wait. We were waiting for spring. We were waiting for something, an absolution that never came. One Saturday in early March, the first decent day of the year, I was outside, trying to rake the matted, wet leaves from my flower beds. My back was aching. The front door opened. Nora came out, wearing an old sweatshirt of Arthur's. "I'll do that, Mom," she said. You're awake." It was only noon. I couldn't sleep. She took the rake from my hands. Her grip was sure. "Go inside. I'll get the yard." I watched her for a moment. She raked with a steady, strong rhythm. The rhythm of a dishwasher, of someone used to hard, repetitive, thankless labor. I went inside. I felt restless. I don't know why I did it. Maybe it was seeing her do his yard work. Maybe it was the light. But I found myself cleaning. Really cleaning. I went into Arthur's study. I was dusting his bookshelves. I got to the box. The mahogany box. I opened it. My father's ring was inside. Nora had put it back. I picked it up. Heavy. Honest. I turned it over in my hand, and I saw it. Something I had never noticed before. Something Nora, in her hours of studying it, had clearly missed, inside the band, my father's ring. I'd said my mother gave it to me. She had. But I hadn't looked at it closely in decades. There was an engraving, faint, almost worn away, AG to MP 10/17/1942. Forever, my father's initials. My mother's. I stood there, staring at it, and then I went to my own jewelry box. The real one, the one in my bedroom. I pulled out my own wedding ring, the one I still wore AR to HM. 0604 to 1977. Forever. A terrible, brilliant, awful idea bloomed in my mind. A finale cinematique, Kaufman-esque twist. A test. No, not a test. A lesson. A painful, necessary, surgical one. My plan. The one I'd had before she came home. It wasn't dead. It was just different. I drove downtown. Not to the pawn shop. I went to the other side of town. To Mr. Abram, the old jeweler. The one who had made my ring. He was semi-retired, but he still kept his shop open 2 days a week. He'd known Arthur. I walked in. The bell tinkled. "Helen," he said, looking up over his spectacles. He was surprised to see me. "Mr. Abram." I laid my father's ring on the velvet mat. "I need you to do something for me." "It's a beautiful piece, Helen." "Your father's?" "Yes." My voice was thick. I need you to change the engraving." He looked up, confused. "Change it?" "I need you to remove it, polish it out, and I need you to engrave this." I wrote it on a slip of paper, AR2H, MC0604 1977, forever. Mr. Abram looked at the paper. He looked at the ring. He looked at me. He was from my generation. He didn't ask why. He just saw the pain in my eyes. "And," I said, my voice dropping, "there's one other thing. Can you make it look more worn on one side? And can you add a scratch? A deep one, right here." I pointed. He was a jeweler. He was an artist. He understood. He was being asked to forge a memory, to counterfeit a life. "Helen," he started, his voice gentle. "Please," I whispered. It's for Nora," that's all I had to say. He knew Nora. He'd seen her grow up. He'd probably heard the whispers. He nodded slowly. "It's unconventional, but for Arthur, yes, I can do it. It will be ready. Next week." "Thank you," I said. "And Mr. Abram, this is just for us." Of course, I left the shop. My heart was a traitor in my chest. I was a liar. I was setting a trap made of love and grief and a terrible, desperate need for her to understand. When I got home, Nora was still raking. She had cleared the whole front yard. She was sweating despite the chill. "It looks good, Mom," she said, leaning on the rake. She tried to smile. "Yes," I said, looking at her. "It does." The next week was the longest of my life. I picked up the ring on a Friday. Mr. Abram slid it across the velvet mat. I gasped. It was Arthur's ring. It wasn't, of course. It was my father's, but it had been changed. The gold was worn thin on one side. The engraving inside was perfect, and there it was. The scratch, the deep, jagged gouge from the retaining wallstone. Mr. Abram had done his work with a terrible, loving skill. He had recreated the life. "It's perfect," I whispered. I used an old file of my grandfather's," he said, as if confessing. "To get the scratch right, I paid him. I drove home. I held the lie in my hand. It was warm from my pocket. Nora was at work. I went to Arthur's study. I took the biscuit tin, full of her hard-earned dirty money, and I put it on the desk. Then I put the forged ring into the mahogany box. I placed it right in the center of the velvet hollow, and I waited. She came home at 7:30 a.m. smelling of bleach. She showered. She came downstairs for coffee, her ritual. "Good morning," I said. My voice was tight. "Hey." She shuffled to the coffee pot. "Nora," I said. "Come with me." She followed me, confused, to the study. "Mom, I'm really tired. This will only take a minute." I stood in front of the desk. She stood beside me. You've been working hard, I said. I'm trying. You've paid back. $3,400. I pointed to the tin. It's enough. For me. For Sarah. It's done. What? No, it's not even all of it. It's enough, I said. The penance is over, but there's something else. I put my hand on the mahogany box. You took your father's ring, I said, and you sold it. And it was melted down. Mom, please, she begged. Don't, not today. It was melted down, I said, my voice hard. Or so I thought. I opened the box. The ring sat there. The forged ring, bathed in the morning light. The scratch was visible. The wear was perfect. Nora stopped breathing. Her eyes. I will never forget her eyes. They went from exhausted to confused to a wild, impossible, dawning hope. She reached out a shaking hand, her raw red finger. She touched it. I don't, she stammered. The pawn shop, I lied. The man, he was wrong. He hadn't sent it to the smelter. He put it in the safe. He said it was too worn, too unique. He held it. I've been paying him every week, a little at a time, to buy it back. I pointed to the biscuit tin. That's where your money was going. I paid the last payment yesterday. It's yours, Nora. You bought it back. She looked at the tin of money. She looked at the ring. She looked at me, and she believed me. She believed in the miracle. She dissolved. It was the only word for it. She fell against the desk, her legs giving out, and she sobbed. A sound of such profound, gut-wrenching relief. It was the most beautiful and terrible sound I have ever heard. It's his, she cried. She picked it up. She turned it over. She saw the scratch. It's the scratch. It's the scratch, I confirmed. And inside, go on, I said. She held it up to the light. AR. To HM 0604.1977. Forever. It's him. She kissed it. She kissed the ring. Then she grabbed me. She, who hadn't hugged me in years, pulled me into an embrace so tight it hurt my ribs. She buried her face in my shoulder, soaking my blouse. Thank you, Mom. Thank you. I thought he was gone. I thought, thank you. I held her. I held my daughter, and I held the lie between us. The lie that had seemingly healed her. The lie that had brought her back. She pulled away, her face a mess of tears and joy. She put the ring on a chain around her neck. Her old, tarnished silver chain. She tucked it under her shirt. I'll never take it off, she said. Ever. I know, I said. She looked lighter. The guilt was gone. She was smiling. A real smile. She hugged me again and went upstairs. I heard her. She was humming. I stayed in the study. I stood there shaking. The lie had worked. It had worked too well. I had given her absolution. I had given her a forgery of her father's forgiveness, and it felt like the most profound, most terrible sin I had ever committed. I had wanted her to understand the value of the ring. Instead, I had just replaced it. I had proven her right. It was just a thing, replaceable, buyable. The change in Nora was immediate and profound. It was as if I had lanced a boil. The gray, exhausted ghost was gone, replaced by my daughter. She still worked at the diner. She insisted. I still have to pay you back for the $1,400, Mom, and I like it. I like being tired. I like the work, but she was alive. She talked at dinner. She helped me in the garden, and this time we talked. She told me stories about the cooks. She laughed, and always under her shirt was the ring. I would see her touch it through the cotton of her t-shirt. A small subconscious gesture, a reassurance. She was anchored. My lie had given me my daughter back. I should have been happy. I was miserable. I was living a Kaufman script. I was the fraud. I had built our new happy life on a foundation of pure deceit. Every time she smiled at me, I felt like a monster. Every time she touched that chain, I flinched. I had wanted to teach her the pricelessness of a single worn object. Instead, I had put a price tag on it. I had told her, see, Even this can be bought back. Your penance has a number, 3,400. I had reinforced the very lesson I had tried to destroy, that everything is a transaction. We lived in this happy, false peace for 2 months. March turned to April. The garden began to bloom. Nora. She was 32, living at home, working as a dishwasher, and for the first time in her life, she seemed content. The end came, as it always does, not with a bang, but with a piece of paper. It was a Saturday. We were doing spring cleaning, a real one, together. We were in Arthur's study, a room Nora now entered freely. She wasn't afraid of his ghost anymore. She had made her peace. She was wearing his ring. She was sorting his desk. The man drawer, as he'd called it. The one filled with old warranties, foreign coins, stray screws, and receipts. "Look at this, Mom," she laughed, holding up a warranty for a 1998 blender. He kept everything. She was happy. I was dusting the top shelves. Dad's system was just putting things in a box, she said, pulling out a stack of old envelopes. And then she went quiet, that same wrong kind of quiet, the one I remembered from the day I found the pawn shop receipt. "Nora?" I asked, not turning around. "Mom." Her voice was strange, thin. What's this?" I turned. She was holding a small, folded, velvet-lined receipt. A jeweler's receipt. My blood turned to ice. "Mr. Abram, I had put the receipt in my purse. But no, in my coat pocket. My winter coat, which I'd hung in Arthur's closet, in the study. And she must have been, no, I must have, it didn't matter. She had it. She read it aloud. Her voice was flat, robotic. Customer, Helen Miller. Item, one 1940s men's gold band. Service? Her voice cracked. Service, Polish out existing engraving. Engraved new, AR to HM, 06.04, 1977. Forever. Service. Distress band, add. Deep scratch to match sample photo. She stopped. She couldn't go on. The silence in the room was absolute. It was the loudest sound I've ever heard. The tick-tick-tick of the mantel clock was an explosion. She looked up at me. Her face was white, chalk. She didn't cry. She didn't yell. She just looked, with an expression of such clarity. It was a terrible adult clarity. Her hand, her red, chapped dishwasher's hand, went to her neck. She pulled the chain out. The ring, my father's ring, the lie, swung in the air between us. She looked from the ring to the receipt, to my face. You made this, she whispered. I couldn't speak. My throat was closed. I just nodded. Once. This isn't his. No, I managed to say. It was a dry rasp. This is Grandpa's ring, isn't it? The mailman. The one you offered me. Yes, she stared at me. The hope that had been living in her eyes for 2 months. It didn't just die. It curdled. It turned into something cold and hard. The pawn shop. The first story was true, I whispered, tears finally breaking free, streaming down my face. It was melted. It's scrap. It's gone. I saw you. You were so broken. I wanted to fix you. Fix me. She said the words. They weren't a question. They were a verdict. Nora, sweetheart. I did it because I love you. I couldn't watch you just grieve forever. So you gave me a lie? Her voice was rising, gaining a terrifying cold strength. You let me cry over this prop? You let me talk to him, holding this? She ripped the chain from her neck. The silver snapped. The ring, the forged, beautiful, awful lie, fell to the wooden floor with a dull, heavy thud. We both stared at it. I just wanted you to be happy, I sobbed. Happy, she spat. You didn't want me to be happy. You wanted you to be happy. You couldn't live with the mess, the real, ugly, unfixable mess. So you faked it. You distressed it. You You forged his forgiveness. No, Nora. Yes. That's what this is. You let me believe I'd been forgiven. That I'd earned it back. But I didn't. It's still gone. It's still gone. And now, the final sting. The one I hadn't seen coming. She wasn't just angry at me for the lie. She was furious at herself, and I believed it, she whispered, her face twisting in self-loathing. I was so stupid, so weak. I wanted the miracle. She looked at the ring on the floor. You know, she said, her voice dropping to a terrifying calm. I knew, somewhere, deep down, I knew it. What do you mean? The scratch, she said, her eyes vacant. The one you had Mr. Abram make. It's wrong. What? It's on the wrong side. The real scratch. The one from the stone. It was closer to the H in the engraving. This one is, it's perfect. It's too cinematic. I looked at it every single day. And I told myself, I was just remembering it wrong. She had known. Her subconscious had known it was a forgery. But her need for forgiveness, for redemption, was so profound. She had willed herself to believe the lie. She had become complicit in my deceit. That was the final betrayal. Not that I had lied to her, but that I had shown her that she was willing to lie to herself. She looked at me. The anger was gone. All that was left was a vast, cold, empty space between us. You shouldn't have done that, Mom. Her voice was dead. You took away my work, my grief. It was mine. It was real. It was the only real thing I've had, and you faked it. She didn't pick up the ring. She stepped over it. She walked out of the study. She walked out of the house. The front door didn't slam. It just closed. With a soft final click, I was left alone. With the open box, the receipt, and the perfect, useless, terrible lie lying on the floor.